I saw some practice plans from a master coach online this week, and I still don't understand the process that we take in terms of practice planning, practice design. So these particular practices were essentially unopposed block drill, for layups, unopposed block drill for passing, unopposed block drill for shooting, unopposed block drill for defense, kind of semi-opposed defensive drill, 5-on-0 offense, 5-on-5 scrimmage. It's a fairly typical practice. It's how many of my coaches designed practices when I was young, and I think it's fairly consistent through all levels of play. That's a kind of a standard template for a practice. You dedicate some time to each skill individually, spend some time on your 5-on-0 offense, and then go ahead and go into scrimmaging at the very end, 5-on-5. And I do some of the same things. I do some block practice, but my block practice tends to be variable. So instead of doing, let's say a straight line dribbling drill, where we're doing, 100 crossovers or something like that to half court and back, and all we're working on is crossover dribbles at one time. So it's kind of block constant practice. Instead, I do something like I play dribbling tag, where it's going to be block practice because we're just working on dribbling, but it's variable because the moves and the areas of the court and the relation to defensive players and teammates and so forth is constantly changing. So I'm only working on one skill, but I'm doing it in a more representative environment. So I can focus on that one skill. I can focus on dribbling if that's what I want to focus on. But I can start to add in some of the same elements that are going to be there in a game. And so I definitely do use this idea of block practice, just working on one specific skill at one time. But I try to add to the drills so that it's not just block constant practice, but there are some variables. It is somewhat representative of what could occur in a game. And there's some decisions that are there to be made by the players, both offensively and defensively. So it's kind of opposed block practice. But I also try in my practices to incorporate actual games throughout the practice, not just at the end. So 3-on-3 play, 2-on-2, 1-on-1, all these different things, are going to be a part of my practices, and I'm not going to wait until the very end to scrimmage. I just think this idea that the proper way to develop skills or to develop players is to do, one skill on its own, undefended, next skill on its own, and then at the end we're going to put it into 5-on-5. To me, there should be some kind of transition between, if you're going to do a block unopposed practice of some skill, to me there has to be some intermediate step between the unopposed block practice and a full 5-on-5 game. And so that might be doing block unopposed practice, block opposed practice. It might be block unopposed practice into a small-sided game, 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, something like that. But I think there has to be that intermediary step because I think it's asking too much to take something, dribbling. I worked on my moves, great. Well, now I'm in a 5-on-5 situation where I may not actually get a chance to put those moves into the game because maybe we're working on 5-on-5, primarily our half-court offense and defense, and there's not a lot of time to do a, full-speed crossover like we worked on, in our block practice drills. Well, what's that practice really preparing me for if I don't get to use it in any kind of game situation? And it might be, the next day or the next day before I actually use this move that I practiced for 10 minutes in even a scrimmage situation, let alone in a real game. And so I think if we're going to do these block unopposed practice, the next step should be the block opposed practice, where or a small-sided game. So we work on crossovers, and now we play 1-on-1. Okay, we're working on our chest passes. Now we're playing something like keep away or a no dribble, 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 no dribble game or something like that, where we can work on passing against defensive players. I repeatedly get questions from coaches who, we spend all this time practicing. We do all these, block practice drills, but then we get in games and we commit all these turnovers. It's like, well, yeah, because what you're practicing, the limiting factor of passing is not the ability to, get your thumbs down at the end of a chest pass. It's being able to read your teammates, read the defense, pass to the appropriate area with the appropriate speed, the appropriate touch. And if you're just firing fastballs back and forth to each other in a stationary, or even like a three-man weave type situation, you're not addressing any of the limiting factors in passing. So then you get in a 5-on-5 situation, which is much more complex, and they make mistakes. Of course they do. The practice isn't preparing them for what they're going to face in a game. So I think, personally, I would try to find ways around doing a lot of block constant practice. But if you're going to incorporate the block constant practice because you have younger players, or you just can't get rid of it because it's so ingrained in what you've always done as a player and a coach, make sure that it's going block constant, and then there's something, and then you're scrimmaging at the end, if that's the way you're going to do it. So it's block constant, and then either block opposed practice where you're adding some variability to it, or you're just going into some kind of small-sided game, whether it's 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, that utilizes that skill so they have the opportunity to use the skill that they've practiced without defense in a live situation against real defensive players, but in a less complex environment than a full 5-on-5 game. That way players can have some success with the skill in contested situations before they're put in the full 5-on-5 game, where they're having to account for a number of different variables that were absent during the unopposed practice. So if we can move to slowly add complexity, so we move from the unopposed to an opposed, or we move from the unopposed to a small-sided game, or we move from block opposed practice like I would do to a small-sided game, and then to a scrimmage. So we're gradually increasing the complexity, as opposed to going from a very simple drill, which is an unopposed block drill, to the most complex aspect of basketball, which is a 5-on-5 game. I think that's the change is too steep, and we need to work on skills, and we really need to develop skills in the areas between the unopposed block practice and the 5-on-5 games. I think the sweet spot is either the small-sided games or the block opposed drills, where we can start to work in some of the task constraints and some of the game likeness and the task representativeness of the situations and environments of the game into the drills to work on the specific skills.